All right, so this is, as I said, a fascinating topic. And if you want to ask questions, uh, you can come ask me, and I'll try and filter them, or you can just email them. I mean, we have technology, right? You can email them to me at pastorj@patriotchurch.us. Uh, but we have a privilege. We have, like I said before, how about this guy? Invite him to speak tonight, and what happens? He gets invited to speak 2 Sundays. So it's like we needed just something to prime the pump and take that first blow, and then now it's breaking out. So please give your undivided attention to my longtime friend, who I've known longer than Jamie, Darren Wold.
Are we good, Seth? Awesome. So you guys that don't know me, my name's Darren. Obviously, Jay just told you I've known him since we were teenagers at Zion Christian Center, and grew up together. This is a subject that just really recently has become a large portion of my life. I have 3 girls that I raised, and they're all adults now, and I have 3 grandchildren through those girls. But when my oldest was at WSU, her senior year, she had come home on a weekend with some crazy ideas that her professors were teaching. And all of a sudden, I, as a father, thought, oh, whoa, wait a minute. Did I slip? Did I make a mistake? What did I do? I thought I had this all battened down and well under control. And all of a sudden, my oldest daughter's literally spouting a bunch of evolutionary theory at me. And I'm like, oh, man, Lord, what have I done? And so I had to go back and literally go through like every piece of material I could ever find, whether it was just plainly reading the Word of God or looking at all the different creation science foundations that there are. And there's a lot. There's great materials to choose from. And when we're all done, if you guys want to look at it, I've got a whole table full of it over here that you're welcome to peruse through and see some. And especially if you have kids coming up and you want to make sure that you can kind of insulate them. If they're at all in the public realm at all, they're going to be fed evolution like crazy. It is one of the great lies of the enemy to destroy the foundation which we stand on. Because if he can do that, it's proven in poll after poll after poll. Good Christian homes with their kids, teaching them the right things, if they don't get this really into them, they'll go off to college, and within the first year, we lose 75% to the enemy over this science right here, if you want to call it, this basic teaching, which is the first part of the Bible. It's Genesis, come on. So that's where my heart is. That's where I came from. And so to start this out, before we ever even really get going here, do we have it up on the screen? I guess, do I use this, Jay? Can I just click?
Forward means forward.
Forward means forward, and back means back. Hey, I like it. Okay, so before we actually get going anything, I like to always bring to light some things that maybe people aren't aware of how amazing our God actually is. Because there's some things that sometimes we're taught that we don't see. And so this is one that was a big eye-opener for me. So what we have here, I'm going to give you the backdrop here. 40 years in the desert with the children of Israel, traveling throughout, right? They have the tabernacle they set up, and once a year, the high priest would come in, and he would sprinkle the blood of the red heifer on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, and he would say the name of Yahweh, which in the Hebrew, especially the ancient Hebrew, this is what it was. It was Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Now, remember, we read right to left in Hebrew. So as you're looking at it right there in the handout or behind me on the screen, Yod is on your far right, but that's the first part we read, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and that's Yahweh. Now, the interesting part about that, do you remember who gave them this word? Moses did, right? Moses told them, the high priest, this is what you're to say. Where did Moses get it? Well, he got it from the angel of the Lord when he came into camp. Oh, who is the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament? Well, that's Jesus Christ incarnate coming down, and that's his persona throughout the Old Testament. So this is where it gets interesting. So Jesus Christ tells Moses to tell the people that you're going to say Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh when you sprinkle that blood once a year. Well, here's what it means. Look closely. Behold the hand, behold the nail. This is 1,400 years before Jesus physically walks on the earth in his physical body. And before he was ever crucified on a cross. He just had to make sure they said that name, which meant, behold the hand, behold the nail. So whenever you hear the word Yahweh, that's what Yahweh actually means in Hebrew. Kind of a fantastic thing. And then to run with it, we got one more here that's kind of fun. This was a neat one I found quite a while ago, but I love it. The genealogies in Genesis, going from Adam to Noah. We got Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. And then to the right, you're going to see their names, what their meaning is in Hebrew. Man appointed mortal sorrow, the blessed God shall come down teaching, his death shall bring the despairing rest and comfort. We have the gospel in the genealogies in Genesis from Adam to Noah. I mean, you can't tell me a bunch of little Jewish scribes put that together and threw it in the book. No, I'm sorry. They're not that good. All right? So anyway, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna show you some of the things that this world had in the beginning. So I'm kind of on this page right now, but real quick, what I'm gonna do, whoops, I get loud when I go down. Sorry, Seth. I'm gonna read from Genesis right here real fast, because there's a couple things that go along with this. So bear with me. I'm going to read Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. It's amazing. In that sentence, did you catch what he created? In the beginning, time. He created time. So it wasn't time before this. Okay? He created the heaven. That's space. That's where everything is. The earth, that's matter. So in the first verse of our Bible, there's a trinity of creation. Oh, and by the way, each one of these is its own trinity. In time, you have past, present, and future. Space, you have height, length, width. And matter comes in three phases, right? You have a solid, a liquid, and a gas. So you have a trinity of trinities in the first verse of our own Bible. It's amazing. It's incredible how God just, every little word is so important as you go through this book. And as we go down through the days, you have all the different things that are being made in creation. We're going to go fast because, like I told Jay, I have 40 hours that I have to do in less than 40 minutes. So, yeah, good luck, Darren. So what I want to do is I want to jump right down here to Genesis 1 and 6. And it says, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. So imagine this. You know, when I first read that, you have the waters, and there's a firmament in the middle. I remember as a kid thinking, that must be the dirt, right? There's dirt, firmament, that sounds right. The problem is go to, you're probably on your next page in your Bible, to Genesis 1:20. This is where you get a little interesting here. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and the fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. What's the firmament? That's the air. So if the firmament is the air, that's an interesting thing. There are waters above the air that we breathe. There are waters around us. And all throughout the Bible, there's a comment in Psalms, there's a comment in Proverbs where they're talking about the waters that be above the earth. Blessed be the waters that be above the earth. There's a huge important thing that we're going to get to, and it has to do with that picture you see right there. Because one of the things we find is we dig underground, and we're finding out what it is God created in this first 6 days. And it's a 6-day creation. And I don't have time to go into it all, but guys, I'm sure you've heard of the day-age theory or the gap theory. There's these theories that they try to sneak in great amounts of time. And that's where a lot of the evolutionary theory got into the church, was through those theories that came out in the 1800s, late 1700s, and they tried to push this really hard. And it's all a horrible fallacy. And it was made up because at that time they were digging up fossils out of the ground, these massive fossil beds, and they didn't know how do we make this work with God's Bible? They didn't know what they were seeing. Well, they're just seeing what was left over from the flood. All these animals had to die, right? All these trees, all these other creatures had to die. So you're finding the bodies, the remains of them. But they couldn't allocate that. And at the time, the popular common scientific teaching was that there was millions of years to have to kill all these animals for them to die. So they had to find a way to get millions of years into the Bible. And that's what they did. You had a couple people that did it. I'll throw it up real quick. I got a book here right here. Earth's Earliest Ages by George H. Pember from 1879. Wonderful Christian man, amazing man, understands the rest of the Word of God like you wouldn't believe. He's amazing. But he slips up on this one thing, and he brings in the ability for the day-age theory or the gap theory through his writings. And even today, there are some really good Christian commentators and media groups that still believe this book from 1879. And it's sad because all he did is he just ran with things that were coming out of Charles Lyell's mouth, which have to do with the geologic timetable and millions of years to lay down all the layers of dirt that we see out there, which is kind of interesting. You ever been out there in the dirt much? You know, I've worked a lot in the dirt. I bet, Charles, you've been out in the dirt a bit. And you always wondered, when there's layers of dirt, and they say that it took millions of years, how come for the first time I dig down and there's sandstone for millions of years and now it's all limestone? And then the next thing you see is we got granite. What happened here? Did comets hit the earth? And for millions of years they were only limestone comets. It just makes no sense. Where is this material coming from that they like to teach us that? But if you believe in a flood, all this could be laid down in one massive flood. You just all the layers at the same time. I mean, we see a flood here anywhere, and all of a sudden you go out and you look at all the silt and all the mud and all the dirt that gets washed in. That's what you're seeing. So as we continue on, though, with that picture. So look at everything up there. They're huge. I mean, there's a picture of a dragonfly that has a 36-inch wingspan. That could not fly today. You have a picture of some of these dinosaurs. Like there's an 80-foot Apatosaurus. He has nostrils the size of a horse. He's 80 feet long. You know, you're talking something that weighs, 80 tons? How could he breathe today? He couldn't. Physically, if he got enough oxygen actually into his body, he'd set his sinuses and his nasal passages on fire from the friction. Okay? So something was different in our atmosphere, hugely different from the original creation that God made for us. And that's why we started with that firmament, to understand the waters above and the waters beneath. So there was water around the earth in some way, shape, or form. So there's a really neat theory, and I tend to go with it because it makes a lot of sense. And it was brought forth by a couple different gentlemen, and I think the one that has the best hang on it is Dr. Kent Hovind, and he talks about it. It's called the canopy theory, about what could those waters be. And the interesting thing is, I have another book to back it up, so I'll show you this one. So if you haven't seen Josephus, he has a book that's really good. He wrote this back, so he was a Jewish historian at the time of Christ. And he was writing down the oral history from the rabbis that were telling all the oral stories in the temple of how the earth came to be and all the things that had happened in the Jewish nation and throughout the world. He wrote it down in this book. It's really fascinating. Well, one of the things you find out in the very beginning of this book when you're going through it, Josephus lists in the Jewish oral history that there was a crystalline firmament above the atmosphere of air. And what he talked about is something that was made out of water, crystalline. Well, what is crystalline water? Well, that's ice. I mean, what else could it be, right? And so they talk about it in his book that it was anywhere from 4 to 6 fingers thick. So you're talking, 3, maybe 6, 8 inches thick of ice surrounding our planet. It's very interesting because why would there be ice up there? Well, here's what we're finding out. The atmosphere had to be different for those things right there to survive. There's no way, like that bird, come on, look at that blackbird. It's taller than the man just from its tail to its head. Imagine that thing. It couldn't fly today. It couldn't get itself airborne, just like that dragonfly couldn't. We'll go to the next one because there's a picture here I want to show you. How many of you guys have seen Jurassic Park? Come on, you all have. Except for Charles, he fell off the planet. He's never seen it. That's all right. So look up in that left-hand corner, you see that little yellow circle. That's that amber that in the Jurassic Park movie, they drilled into the amber, they pulled out the blood out of the mosquito to get the DNA to then clone all the dinosaurs, right? But what they didn't tell you, and you probably did see if you paid close attention, is there's little air bubbles all around that mosquito. In fact, in petrified amber all over this planet, we get little air bubbles in the amber, because what is petrified amber? It's tree sap that's fallen down, it's become petrified. And we've drilled into those air pockets and we've been able to sample them. And what we find is amazing. In fact, this is what gives us an idea of, wow, God, you're an amazing God. So right now, you and I are at sea level, or not sea level, we're at 2,100 feet, and we're at 1 atmosphere, okay? So that's the air pressure around us. And we're breathing about 21% oxygen in the air around us. And then those plants that need food out there, all that green stuff, they get 0.04%. That's pretty low. I mean, you literally think they're starving out there all the time. So when they drilled into those little air bubbles, they found out that pre-flood atmosphere, that was 2 atmospheres. So it's twice the air pressure that we have right now. And then instead of that 21% oxygen, it's 35% oxygen. So it's 50% plus more at twice the atmospheric pressure. And by the way, for the plants, it's 6%. We're talking thousands of times greater concentrations of carbon dioxide in the pre-flood atmosphere. In fact, modern biologists that have actually seen this data have said, okay, so 6% carbon dioxide at 2 atmospheres, You could probably walk into the forest and hear it grow. It probably crackled. The bark was bursting all the time. Our trees were growing feet a day. Weeds probably appeared overnight and would be 5, 6 feet in a day or two. And you could probably stand out and watch your flowers grow. Okay? Seriously, that's the amount of energy that would be coming through 6% oxygen with 2 atmospheres for just the plants. Let's talk about the humans and the animals then. So in our blood, we have what's called hemoglobin that needs oxygen. And when you run and exhaust yourself, you've used the oxygen out of your hemoglobin, lactic acid builds up. You get tired, you feel tired. If you're in a pre-flood world with twice the atmospheric pressure at 50% plus more oxygen, you would have hyperoxygenated hemoglobin, and even your plasma in your blood would become oxygenated. That means you would never feel tired. You could run for hundreds of miles. You would never feel fatigue. The only thing you need is, do I have enough sole on my shoe? Do I have enough food and water in my backpack to keep running? You want to go to Seattle? Take off. Hope your shoes last. Which probably is why when we look in the pre-flood world, as we're digging and going down underground and looking at different places where we come to those types of buildings and places, we don't see what we see now. They had no need for cars and trucks and tractors and maybe a lot of the other things. They did have technology, and in many ways it was probably even higher and better than what we have right now today. But it didn't look like what we have because, let's face it, we're living in a broken world, a cursed world, and we are living in fragile, weakened bodies that are nothing like God originally designed and planned. So it's amazing the difference we're looking at. So imagine now you have this compressed atmosphere that is now, not only is it making you stronger and healthier. By the way, every professional sport team, whether it's basketball, baseball, football, you name it, they have hyperbaric chambers where when a player gets injured, they put them in there and they'll heal 5 to 10 times faster than they will just outside. And that's how they get the healing process to build up faster. Because if you're paying a guy as much money as they pay some of these guys, you don't want him sitting there healing on the bench. You want that man out on the ball field, catching the ball, throwing the ball, whatever he does with the ball. So this whole process is a well-known process, even in the medical field, that putting intense pressure with more oxygen will increase our body's healing capacity, strength, your well-being, your fitness, everything gets better. There's one more thing. So if it's water sitting above the earth, here's something we know about water. Do you know that right now our sun is emitting all kinds of cosmic radiation, X-ray radiation, ultraviolet radiation, and the only thing that can stop it, well, several feet of concrete or a little bit of water. Like on a really cloudy day, can't get through. So if you had a couple inches of ice all the way around this planet, you would not receive all the X-rays, all the ultraviolet radiation, all the cosmic radiation coming from other stars all across our universe. In other words, all the things that make us age and get old from being outside would be gone. And now you're eating perfect food without any genetic mutations like all the different things that are in our food now, all the different chemicals. They're gone. You're eating perfect food out of the Garden of Eden. Because there's some things that we still don't eat, even when we really try. Like we really try. How many of you, when you read in Genesis where he says, we eat all the leafy greens, all the fruit, and all the seeds thereof? Oh, how many of you are eating the seeds when you eat the fruit? Because he said we should. There are minerals in those seeds you can't get anywhere else. People get sick and have problems with their bodies. I think one of the big things is the nutrition that we miss because we're not doing what he said. And one of the things he said really clearly is to eat those seeds. We were taught when I was a little kid, oh, don't eat the seeds of your apples. There's poison in there. And then I'll never forget my chemistry teacher, senior year, he goes, do you guys know how much apple seeds you have to eat a day for it to even have an effect? He goes, it's going to be like 25 pounds a day. And I'm like, wow, okay, I probably can't eat that much. I mean, there's no way. But having it inside is another thing, because when some of these nutritional elements are in you, some of it actually still is a poison. Here's the interesting thing, but your body can't open it. The only thing that can open it is a cancer cell, something from leukemia, all these different diseases. God designed these things for us to eat, have it inside us. And then when these bad things we get inside us, they unlock, open it up. Next thing, it instantly kills it, and it's gone. But what happens if your immune system doesn't have the ammunition it needs to fight it off? It's like sending your soldiers out to war without bullets in their guns. That's one of the interesting things from just reading that. So let's look. We got a pressurized atmosphere. We're getting protected from everything, and we're eating perfect foods. And that's why these people are living to be 900 years old. I mean, we got, Methuselah, 969 years, right? That ain't happening now, obviously, but it did back then. And I remember as a kid, I remember hearing a gentleman actually say from a pulpit when I was like 5 years old at Open Bible Church in the Valley, well, that wasn't really years. Those were months. They used a lunar calendar and they counted their months as a year. And I go, wow, okay. Well, then as I got older, and there's a thing I don't have it out for you right now, but in the genealogies, and I have it sitting over there, just up here, there's a couple guys out here, Enoch, and I think the other one is, so you have Enoch and Lamech that both had children at the age of 65. Well, if you're counting it as months, that's a miracle in itself because that means that they had a kid when they were 5 years old. Wow. Okay, I didn't know they were maturing that quickly. So anyway, you can't believe that stuff. But I do believe that they were living to be 900 years old. And you think about this, how would this affect then the animals? Well, yeah, think about that. If people living to be 900 years old, what is preventing these animals from continuing to grow as they get older? And I think that's what you're seeing with dinosaurs. We know that reptiles will never stop growing as long as they live. I think what you're looking at in dinosaurs is just reptiles that continued to grow because they had perfect living conditions. And they got bigger as they grew. And that's why we see them. And then after the flood, because we don't have those conditions anymore, we still have reptiles, but we don't have the conditions that allow them to get that big anymore. There's a lot of reptiles out there, if they were just allowed to continue to grow, you're probably looking at like some of the chameleons maybe became the size of, like a triceratops or some of the other larger dinosaurs that look like that because, hey, they're 500, 600, 700 years old and they just got bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So again, what happened then as we go, here, I better go to the next one so you guys are looking. As we're looking here, what happened with this combination of dinosaur and human footprints? So in Texas, they had, Glen Rose, Texas, they had a creek that washed away. It was clear back in like 1920 that a flood came through. And all of a sudden, on the creek bank, when it dried out that year, were human footprints with dinosaur footprints back and forth on top of each other, inside of each other, almost as if they were walking or running together like you would with your dog, all right? It was interesting. It was verified actually by a Texas crime lab when they came in and actually did the verification that, yes, this is human footprints, and these are, yes, dinosaur footprints. The interesting thing, I didn't put it up there, but within literally months of this happening, and hitting the news back in the 80s, a gentleman came out from the PBS channel Nova, and he would not look at them. And when he was asked on live TV, do you see anything here that would make you question the theory of evolution? He purposely wouldn't look at him so he could say, no, I see nothing here that would make me question the theory of evolution, because he did not want to see them. He didn't want to look at them. And within weeks after that, a friend of his, a very close friend of his, was found on site with a hammer and a pipe and had literally defaced a great majority of the ones that were still available to go view and see. Yeah, because they couldn't have that, taking away from, evolution is not really a scientific theory, it's a religion. Evolution is a religion, it's their state religion, state-sponsored religion. You could call creation a religion. Yes, I do believe it. It's in the Bible, but evolution is too. There's no proof for it, period. It's just a religion, all right? Let's keep going here. We're skipping over so much. So what about all the missing links? The evolution will tell us there has to be missing links in between as people, as apes became people. Well, there never were any missing links that were verified. Every single one of them, Piltdown Man, Kennewick Man, Lucy, Java Man, they were all found to be frauds. And almost all of them back in the 1800s. I mean, we're talking 1850s to 1879, their own scientists in their own universities would come out and go, that's a pig's tooth. That's an orangutan skull that you put on a human skull? What? They were actually totally dissected, not even by Christians at all, by their own actual group of scientists that were working with them in their own universities and known to be frauds. I bring this one up because you've all heard of Neanderthals, the cavemen. And it was very interesting because what you have is in Neanderthal France, when they start digging some of these skeletons up, they would bring them out. And what you're looking at, wow, it looks a lot like a person. It really does. But what they did is to make them look like an ape, the gentlemen that were digging them up, who needed the grant money to keep digging, they would take a chisel and they would break off the nasal bone right there to make it look more ape-like. And after about 3 years of digging these skeletons out, they could not keep up with all the new findings. And too many of them started to come out that were, oh, that's a human. That actually has a human nasal passage and a human nasal bone up there. It's not an ape. We know this isn't anything like a caveman or anything else. It's just a human. And what was really neat, and I don't know if I have it, I'll look. Yes, I do. There it is. So that's Jacques Cousteau. Dr. Jacques Cousteau in 1977 went over to France and he looked at all these Neanderthal skeletons. And you know what he said? This is unique. He goes, these are just really old, really robust humans. And when he said robust, he wasn't kidding. The bones themselves we're talking 5 to 10 times more dense and stronger than our own bones. Even to the point that when he puts them in a hydraulic vise that they use for stress testing, many of the leg and arm bones could not be broken or went at such a high pressure that he said these people probably couldn't break their own bones, most likely. They tested almost to the level of a tensile steel rod would. The other thing is the bones, if you noticed, I'm going to go back to that first picture. You notice the brow bone right there above the eyebrows? That is a bone in our skull that continues to grow all our life. So the older you get, the more that bone is going to protrude. So if you live to be 2, 3, 4, 500 years old, you're going to have a very big protrusion up here. In fact, your whole face is going to start to change shape a little bit because of these types of things. The jawbone, really heavy duty and thick because, oh, they were eating all their life. Remember, as you use your bones with your muscles, your bones actually grow. They get thicker, stronger, more powerful. That is a medical procedure. It's very common. In fact, I just got introduced to that in Sandpoint just 3 weeks ago when one of the medical doctors came up and said, Darren, you know what? If these guys are working out and doing stuff on a daily basis, their bones are just getting way more stronger than ours ever would. Because you can tell the difference between a normal person and a weightlifter just in their bones alone. You don't even have to look at their muscles. Their bones will be thicker, more dense, and they'll have more muscular attachment points. And so when Jacques Cousteau went up and examined these bodies, he said, these humans probably had enough muscle on them, they could grab Jay or I and throw us over the goalpost. Any of them. They're that strong, that powerful, that robust. Just amazing. So we're probably looking at, these are some of the few that were found that were living to be those great ages. Either somebody right after the flood when they were still living to be 400, 500, 600 years, or from right before the flood. And that's what we're looking at. So we'll jump on. Boy, we're going to kind of skip through this just to let you know carbon dating is such a fraud. If you go to this page, it'll at least show you how big of a fraud it actually is. Because they don't have the knowledge of what our world was before the flood, especially with that atmosphere that was totally different than our atmosphere is today, and they're trying to compare it to today's atmosphere, there's just no way that any of it works. And it's laughable when you look at some of their samples. These are samples that when they first did them, they came out totally wrong. And they're like, oh, this is awful. We can't let the public see this. So then they immediately tried to get rid of it. Well, luckily, we have people that saved it. Because what you're going to see is a bunch of samples up there that are supposed to be millions of years old, and yet they're 20,000 or 30,000 years old. But because they don't know what that pre-flood atmosphere is like, it actually is probably pretty right on in what their test showed. And if you go back and can input what a pre-flood atmosphere would be and use that as your constant as you do the actual dating, you're probably going to get close to what our actual timeline is. And how do we do that? Well, the simple way to do it is I just grab the Bible and we go through the genealogies. And that's where I showed you this chart from before. And if you look through these genealogies, starting from Adam, working your way up to Noah, you can add the dates. You know, it's the boring part of the Bible. Such and such begat, such and such begat. Oh yeah, there's just a lot of begatting going on, God. But it allows us to count the years. And if you do that, you're going to come up to this line right here. That's the flood at 1,657 or 56 years. So before, from Genesis, from Adam to the flood, that wasn't even 2,000 years. But you had people living to be 900 years. I mean, you had some crazy stuff going on at that point in time. And this means, okay, wait a minute. And then where we are right now compared to the flood, well, if you keep going with those dates all through the Old Testament and then into the New Testament. We can date that out, and we're right now sitting real close to 6,000 years. Real close, maybe give or take 50 years or so. Very interesting then, we're a young earth, 6,000 years? It's not millions of years old, but again, 6,000 years, think about it, that actually is pretty old, because none of us are ever making it barely past 100, right? Yeah, so 6,000, yeah, that's a long time. Plenty of time for all this stuff to fit. We don't need all these other crazy theories and things that they want to throw at us with all the millions of years. We don't need that. Everything fits perfect with the biblical timeline. So anyway, when you see carbon dating, and it's just one, there's argon dating, there's potassium dating, they all end up with crazy dates. And the funny part is they won't keep them until it's the date they want it to be, which is insane. Think about that. I'm going to go out and measure a piece of wood, but I won't tell you how big it is until I get the measurement that I wanted. You would look at me like, you got a rubber ruler, son. Well, duh. Yeah, and that's what they do. They literally have a rubber ruler. And one of the other ones that's always neat, my kids used to love this part because we did go over this when they were little, is that with evolutionary teaching, they'll tell you that the fossils they find in the dirt are dated by the rocks, the soil level that they find them in. So then you go, okay, all right. How do you date the soil? Well, we do that by the fossils that we find in the rocks. What? That's circular reasoning. You can't say this for that and that for this. There's no standard at all to stand on. Well, there isn't, because they know if you do this to those fossils, they're all going to come about the same. And that's what scares them, because they realize, uh-oh, it's going to show the Bible's right. And they can't let that out. They really can't let that out. Here's the other thing, too. This is something my grandkids love. So we have a whole book on dragons and dinosaurs, and we would read that. Oh my gosh, they would request that almost every night when they were living with me as a bedtime story. And it talks about how dragons are very common in all ancient civilizations, and you'll find all kinds of actual dragon pictures carved into reliefs on buildings, ancient buildings in Babylon itself, when Saddam Hussein, when he spent all that money to rebuild Babylon, one of the things that they found as they cleaned off all the sand, there were lions and dragons on the buildings. Well, why would you put a mythical creature that doesn't really exist on your huge temple, right? No, I think it was real. They had them. They were right there in front of them. And so we had lions over here. Yeah, that's a symbol of power. And then there was the dragons. I mean, even the ancient Chinese talk about dragons. The emperor used to have dragon keepers. Why would you have a dragon keeper? Well, to keep the dragons, right? Because dragons pulled his chariot. And if you have a dragon keeper, it's kind of like your horses. You got to have someone take care of the horses. We got to have someone take care of the dragons. It wasn't until the late 1800s that we started with a new word called dinosaur, terrible lizard. So if you go back and find an older Webster's dictionary from the 1700s or even the early 1800s, the word dinosaur is not in there. But the word dragons is. In fact, what's interesting is even up into the 1900s, some of the older Webster's dictionaries, in like 1905, and you look under dragons and it says, now rare. Really? Because we're taught now that that's just mythical, it's make-believe, it's not real. But they knew this stuff was real. I mean, there was no way you're going to hide it from them. I mean, there's stories all over the world about people fighting dragons. And you think, oh, that's just a mythical fairy tale? No, that's the truth. They were just big lizards, dinosaurs. And you think about it, if all of a sudden there were a bunch of grizzly bears roaming the neighborhood out here, man, you'd have guys out there with guns, and man, the guy that shot one, he's going to stand there and get his picture and go, look what I just got, yeah. What happened to the dinosaurs? Well, I'm sure that a lot of them did die because they couldn't handle the atmosphere as they started to get older. But as you have dragons that are living around people are going to kill them off. They're not going to put up with a big apex predator living anywhere close to them. And the guy that does it is going to be the hero, right? He's going to have the story written about him, like all the stories that we've read. Sir George that slays the dragon. I mean, literally, there are thousands. I can go on. Anyway, the grandkids love it, and we read that story all the time. It's a good book. It's from Answers in Genesis. Oh, and that's the other carbon. Oh, here we go. Ice cores. Okay, so where we're getting into is what caused the flood. So we know that something happened to this world to cause our flood, right? And in that process, the whole world had to change. Well, one of the things we know is before the flood, and I better go to it. We're going to just skip a bunch of stuff, guys, so I can show you the picture. He's got it up here, I hope. Right there. Perfect. So that's a picture of the world as we know it, right? But let me put this out to you. That is not what the pre-flood world looked like. That's not what God created. Because he created a world for us to fill. He said, fill the earth and multiply. Well, you know what the problem is with that world? It's 70% water. It's also got deserts and huge ice fields and mountains, places where you can't live. In fact, if you actually do the math, you're going to find out there's 3 to 5% of our planet that's actually truly livable, where you can actually grow crops year-round and you can actually survive year-round on your own. 3 to 5%? Are you telling me that God would go through all that trouble to make just this little band and little bits of places for us to live? No, that's not what he did. This whole place was all what we would think of as all land. And then there was probably less than 20% water in the original world. I'm gonna put forth that you might have had some small inland lakes and seas, like the Mediterranean or maybe the Caspian, the Black Sea, maybe some of the Great Lakes type seas or lakes, and then maybe some small streams with some small little springs coming out of the ground. And the reason is you have a big, huge world now that you can fill everywhere. The other thing too, and this is a crazy one, in the 1800s there was an Australian astronomer, brilliant man, who every summer got to go all over the world in his studies, and he went to all these ancient places where we have megalithic structures. And he's lining up these summer solstice events. So every June, imagine every June 20th, he would be at a new place on the planet. And he noticed, wait a minute, I'm at Stonehenge, and when the summer solstice hits and it's supposed to line up right here, I'm off. And I'm off by a certain percentage. So he writes it down. So then he goes to the pyramids, and he goes, and it's supposed to be right here. Oh, I'm off again. He writes it down. Ooh, that's interesting. It's the same percentage. So then he goes to the next one. He went to over 50 different places all over this planet in his lifetime, and he found they all exactly match the same angle of difference that's off on each one of these places. So he's trying to figure out what happened here. Well, then he started to notice, wait a minute, we have a north and south pole, but we also have a magnetic north and south pole, right? And there's a declination between the two. And we know the earth is spinning on that axis, right? Just like a top. And he knew that if you come up to a top, you spin it, you come up and you just bonk, and you hit that top, it's gonna wobble for a second, and then it's gonna correct itself at a new angle. It won't be at the same angle it used to be. And that wobble is an actual mathematical formula. You can measure it, and then not only can you measure it, you can measure the time it took to get there. So this is late 1800s. And his theory was something hit us about 4,400 years ago, knocked us off our axis, because now we're at 23 and a half degrees. That gives us the winter, the summer, the fall, the spring, all the different seasons we have. Also gives amazing areas of ice and snow at our poles, correct? I'm going to tell you that before this happened, we were straight up and down. And there's a lot of evidence to prove this, because we have tons of different places that have calendars that talk about a 360-day year. Not a 365, not a 364, but a 360-day year. Something impacted us, turned us on a side. We started to wobble, because that's what happens when you hit a spinning object. It created the seasons, and it also caused what we're going to look at right there. So where did the water come for the flood? We know that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, but that's not enough rain to cover the earth, right? It came from the fountains of the deep. So there's an amazing gentleman right over here. The book is called In the Beginning by Dr. Walt Brown. He was a complete and total atheist, entered the military, had some amazing degrees in all kinds of physical science, and he was all over this planet with his military background. And he kept seeing evidence on this planet of a cataclysmic flood and a cataclysmic upheaval all over the planet. It brought him to Jesus. It brought him to the Bible. And he became a Christian from all this, which was amazing to me to think that a man like this could. And what he said was pretty fantastic. He goes, what probably happened is we got hit by something. And he's not going to say exactly what it could have been, an asteroid, a meteor, whatever it is, rubble from something, who knows. It hit the earth, and what we had deep underneath our earth were fountains of the deep. You call that fountains of the deep? Well, imagine chasms of water. So all the ocean water we see above the planet was underneath, probably 10, 20, 30 miles deep. Well, imagine all that rock is now pressing down on that water. It's under crazy amounts of pressure. Estimates of upwards of 40 to 50 million PSI. Can you imagine the load bearing on that rock? Well, all it would take is one thing to crack it, and then that eggshell is bursting. And you're talking all this water is going to come out at literally supersonic speeds. In fact, Walt Brown actually, he predicts that a large portion of this water was moving so fast when it first came out that it became supersonic and left the gravitational pull of the Earth. And that's why we find massive amounts of water all throughout our solar system. Ice circling. Oh, wait, like comets? Bits of ice and rock debris that keep circling the sun. Yeah, that's probably debris left over from the flood that was blasted off our planet from the crazy pressure that this water was under with all the earth on top of it. So all those lines you see in the undersea areas on the map behind me, sorry, getting used to having the map behind me. Those are, you have the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, you have the Southwestern Pacific Ridge, the Indian Ocean Ridge. Those are places where our crust broke open and the fountains of the deep came out. And imagine, as they came out, they rose up. And then when it got to a point, as it's just blasting up, it finally slid back. And that sliding back is what created all the mountain ranges you see today, because we did not have all these mountains that we do now. You know, I don't know if you guys have paid attention, but in 1952, when Sir Edmund Hillary finally summited Everest, one of the things he brought back, which was very interesting, were petrified clams on the top of Mount Everest. In fact, he said they're 10 to 15 feet deep. Some of them are 3 feet wide, and they're in the closed position. Well, if you know anything about walking out on the beach, I'm sure some of you guys have, when you find seashells, they're open, right? You hardly ever find one closed, because that animal has a little muscle that has to pull it closed. As soon as it dies, the muscle relaxes, and it opens. It dies. So if it is closed, it had to get covered with mud and completely inundated with mud and water while it was alive and closed. How could it do that at 29,864 feet? Impossible. But what I would say to you is that was on the bottom. That was somewhere in water. And that's why that thing was there. And then as these huge plates with all the water bursting forth, as they started to move and collide with each other, they pushed up all the mountain ranges we see. Because the other thing you find, and I've seen this in British Columbia, in fact, Jay and I used to go up there for our family vacation every Thanksgiving, and those Rockies up there have places where you can see the actual contours of all the crust up there, the crustal displacement when things were pushed together. What's fascinating is there's no cracks in all that crust. It's hard, solid rock, yet it's bent like it was a piece of licorice. There's no cracks in it. That means it was soft when it was bent. So this had to happen at a time when all of this was like mud, when it got squished together. And that's what I would say, that's what you're looking at. When all those plates went up, they came back, they pressed together. And it's interesting too, you're gonna find a lot of them follow what you and I see as coastlines too, because that's another plate as it stops. This whole idea of Pangea, where everything was connected, it's kind of a fallacy that I think, again, was brought up by the enemy because he wanted to try to get people to not believe in what the Bible says. One of the things you'll notice is there is dirt between South America and Africa, because I was even told as a third grader, yeah, look, they could almost fit. And I remember getting a globe paper and cutting it out and then going, wait, teacher, Africa's huge. It won't even come close to fitting. This map is a Mercator projection, and Mercator projections don't accurately predict the size because they want to show you the location. So you don't really see just how big Africa actually is. It's bigger than North America. It's bigger than South America. It's huge. So when you actually put those things together, you find out there's massive parts of our globe that wouldn't fit in what they would call a Pangea. It just never could happen. And you know, any fifth grader is going to tell you, well, how did dirt get over dirt to get to dirt? Because there is dirt at the bottom of the ocean. It's called the ocean floor. Are you telling me it just floated like a landmass and moved over? They try to tell you that, you know, those cracks are where the magma is coming up and pressing apart. The problem is we've never seen that, ever. It's never happened. What we do see is right all along those cracks, hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean where extremely hot water is just blasting out. Well, wait a minute, if there's water blasting out at the bottom of the ocean, 10,000 feet deep, where does it have to be coming from? Underneath, right? Oh, like maybe some leftovers of the fountains of the deep, where God talked about. Interesting. So the places you find ocean, what I would tell you is that's where all the water was, but it was underground. And then think about it. As the water comes up, what happens to that hollow space when now you have the water and the weight on top? It goes down. And that's what left us with the oceanic basins that you see all over the planet. That's where the fountains of the deep were, but they aren't now. The other thing is, before the flood, when we're standing upright, we probably didn't have these extreme seasons. We know we didn't have weather, because think about it, high pressure. This summer, have we seen much rain this summer? Why? We had a high pressure ridge that sat over this whole area of the United States, and it prevented cloud formation. It prevented weather, okay? If the whole world is like this, you're not gonna see hail. You're not going to see clouds. You won't see snow. You won't see any of that. It'll probably be something in the range. My guess would, think about it. God's going to make a perfect world. I want it about 60, 65 at night so I can sleep. And during the day, it can get up to 75, 80. I'm fine. I'll live with that, right? Perfect growing conditions and then perfect living conditions. So before the flood, they had never seen rain. And that's why the rainbow was a big deal. If you've never seen rain, you have no clue what that great big shiny colorful thing is in the sky, and that's his promise. He's never doing it again. And of course the world completely corrupts it, and look what the enemy has done with our beautiful rainbow. Yeah. So anyway, I think I have time for maybe a few questions. Jay, how close are we?
You've got about another 5 or 7 minutes.
Okay.
How did the ice not melt if it was?
Oh, here, let's go. Yeah, right here, ice cores. This is a good one. So check this out. What you're looking at is one of the most perfectly preserved examples of a baby mammoth. And I think this one was dug up in Russia. And just so you know, there have been years where they've dug up more than like 10,000 of these in Russia. Yeah. And in fact, it's very common. You'll hear from the hunters up there when they're out hunting in the winter, and all of a sudden a big storm comes in. They'll dig into a snowbank, right, to get out of the storm so they're protected. And then they're there for days, and they run out of food. And all of a sudden, one of the guys notices, hey, look, there's a mammoth. And they dig up to it, they cut out the meat, they cook it, and they eat it. It's just fine. Yeah. It's nowhere near as old as they would like you to think, okay? The other thing, too, is they tell you, oh, those woolly mammoths, they were for the Ice Age. Look, they're full of hair. But it's interesting because every single one of them that's been found has had lush jungle vegetation in its mouth, chewing, and in its belly. In fact, did you know that over 50% of them have been found in this position? Like, what is this stuff falling out of the sky? How is this all over? So Jay, you're asking about the ice. Here's an interesting thing. A lot of people don't know that back in the days when we had the shuttle going up, the space shuttle going up out of Cape Canaveral down in Florida, there would be this big white cloud. Well, what is that big white cloud coming out of the exhaust? It's water vapor. When you burn hydrogen, you produce water vapor and heat, and that's one of the byproducts is water vapor. As that cloud would get up into the highest points of our atmosphere, it would never come back down. It would go to the poles. Why? Well, they couldn't figure out for the longest time until they started to do some studies, and they found out that super cold ice that touches space, where we have ultimate zero down to 1 or 2 Kelvin, is highly magnetic. So if it's super cold and highly magnetic, where's it going to go? What's getting pulled to the poles? So think about this. If we have this layer of water, now I will tell you that I believe it was ice. But even if it was just a layer of water vapor, okay, that was just above there holding the air in, and all of a sudden it's touching space, and it's super cold, turning to ice, and it's going to fall back down. Where is it going to go to fall down? The poles that are lush jungle vegetation right now because we have a Earth standing straight up. But as it slowly starts to tilt, this ice starts to come in massive dumps, and it buries these mammoths. Now, this is what's crazy. We find mammoths that these hunters have found when they cut them up. One of the things when they brought the meat home, they've noticed there's no freezer burn in the meat, which means it froze instantly. So what kind of temperatures are we talking about that can freeze a 10 or 15-ton mammoth within minutes, seconds? We're talking negative 375 to ultimate zero. How do you get that cold? Well, it never gets that cold on this planet. I mean, in Antarctica, I think we had the Russian station that recorded 127 degrees below zero. It's the coldest temperature ever in the planet. Well, that's nowhere near, not even a third of the temperature we need to freeze a woolly mammoth standing up with food in his mouth while he's still chewing, okay? Obviously, there was something that dumped, literally coming from space, so cold that it dumped right on top of these things. And there were thousands, if not millions, of these creatures up there, and we find them all the time. And it's screaming in the face of the evolutionists, what you believe is wrong. Oh, yeah. In fact, did you know that there's a massive black market of the tusks? Because you're not killing an animal. See, you go into Africa, oh, you can't bring tusks or any ivory out of Africa. But in Russia, oh, this is big business. In fact, there are gentlemen who all they've done all their life for generations is up in Siberia during the summer months, they go up with these boats, and they're the jet boats, and they literally take a big hose, reverse the jet, it's still in the water, and they run 70, 80, 100 feet of hose up the hill, and they're blasting the mud out, and sure enough, they pull out, maybe 500, 600 pounds of tusks of ivory they take back, and they can sell on the black market for millions of dollars. In some cases they are, in some cases they're not. Some cases like they've broken off and they're away from. The one I actually got to see, you can actually find this. Guys have put this on YouTube and other places where these guys are just going up. And imagine they've built tunnels now because they've been doing this for so many years. And as they go inside, they're blasting and all the water keeps running out. And then, there's a tusk and the guy will pull it off. And it's so big, he can barely carry one. And it'll be like a 30-foot curl and he can barely get it out. And then they get it to the boat and then they load it on and take it back to where their trucks are. And then the guys there are storing them and taking them. Some of these tusks are huge. They make our elephants look like tiny little itty bitty little things. And we're finding them all the time. But again, you're not going to hear about it because they can't let information come out that doesn't substantiate their state religion. Just like what we're going through right now. Like Jay just said, you can't hear the truth about what's happening in this world right now because it doesn't substantiate their propagandist ideas. It's the same thing, yeah. Yes.
Of what it looks like now. Has anybody ever diagrammed a scientific estimate of what it looked like, the landmass looked like before the flood?
The problem is it's really hard to find out where the water might have been because this flood was so catastrophic. And sometimes we don't realize just how catastrophic it was. Let's describe it real quick. You guys know what the tides are, right? Because the moon going around our planet, it produces a tide and it pulls, right? The water, there's a big bulge of water that's always following the moon. Right? We have what's called continents. And so if you look at this last picture that I had up here, where you have the continents, the water stops. Now imagine the continents aren't there. It's all water. So as the moon is going around the earth for a full year, right? These tides, they're going to become what's called harmonic. They're going to build upon themselves. The estimates are anywhere from 200 to 2,000 feet tall. And as they do that, have you guys ever been at the beach where you stood and the waves come under your feet and you feel the sand and slowly your feet just keep sinking? It's called liquefaction, okay? And as your body goes through that, you'll feel yourself go deeper and deeper. You're like, oh, this is weird. Well, imagine this on a grand scale in the time of the flood. And as this massive, huge weight of water is going over what is all this buried debris, it's being sorted hydraulically and through the massive sifting that we actually see today. And it makes sense because it's done by mass. It's not done because of an evolution. It's not the farm, fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal. No. It's the actual set of how dense the bodies are when you sort them. That's how simple it is. Go get a bucket of sand and gravel, fill it with water, shake it around a bunch, and then look. Oh, isn't it funny how it always settles in the same layers? Oh, yeah. That's because it's hydraulically sorted. So this planet was in that massive hydraulic sorting during the flood with these massive waves. It's also why, when Noah got out of the flood in the 7th month, but he didn't get out of the ark landed in the 7th month, but he didn't get out until the 12th month. Well, why did he sit there for 5 months? Because there were probably massive waves like tsunamis still circling the earth until we finally had land masses up enough and the ocean bases deep enough to stop that. Can you imagine looking out the window? Yep.
Why do creationists think that the flood covered the whole earth? Like biblically, is there a reason?
Oh yeah, the flood covered the whole earth because we didn't have the massive mountains we do now.
Right.
That was all flat.
So the water receded off a mountain. What was the mountain?
Mount Ararat. And the flood, as the waters receded, read your Bible closely. It doesn't say the ark landed on Mount Ararat. It landed on the mountains of Ararat. It actually landed on the foothills. In fact, you guys ever get a chance, I would love to go, but I don't think the political climate will ever allow it now. But in Turkey, they actually have a place where they actually have a national monument called Noah's Ark. If you go to Turkey, you can go to Noah's Ark. It's like a national park. And they'll tell you, there it is, it's right there. The thing is after looking at it and really researching it over, I think they're totally right. The valley it's in is called Noah Ungumchu, which means Noah's big boat. And then the valley it's actually placed in is the Valley of the Eight. And these are ancient Turkish names brought out that have been, from time immemorial, have been talked about this area. In fact, in the area, they have what's called drogue stones. They're huge stones that you would throw over the boat in ancient times with a hole through them, with a rope attached to it, to balance the boat out and level it out in rough water. So think about it. Sea of Galilee, you got the rough water coming. They'd put these stones out. They're probably 50, 60 pounds. And you have a rope through it, and it helps as the boat's going through the waves to settle the boat down so it doesn't just go pitching crazily. The thing is, in that valley are some of the largest drogue stones ever recorded. Some of them are 8 and 10 feet tall, weighing upwards of 10 and 20 tons. And they have massive holes that are cut at an angle through the stone. Very interesting. They actually have some that actually have inscriptions on them. And
Supposedly on the ark?
yes. It sounds like what it looks like our ark had drogue stones helping it go through the water. Probably a moon pool, if you guys are familiar with a moon pool. A moon pool is a hole in the boat with walls that come up to the sides where you can see water. And so imagine as you go over a wave, the wave would come up and go down, and as it does, it would push air, right? So imagine with all those animals, they probably got pretty smelly, bad, and as these waves would come by, they would just be forcing fresh air in and out of the boat constantly to help for the circulation. And by the way, all the animals fit with no problem, because one of the things we always forget, think about this, God's really smart, he's not dumb. Would you want to take a great big elephant on the boat with you? No, you want to take a baby, right? A great big camel. No, I want to take a baby. So if you average that out between the huge animals and the smallest of the animals, they're probably all about the size of a sheep, all right? And you're probably looking at somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 different pairs of animals, which on a boat that's 2/3 the size of the Titanic, so 2 football fields long and half a football field wide, that's plenty of room. In fact, if you actually do the math, you're going to find out over half the boat was probably empty, maybe more, maybe 2/3 of the boat was empty. Why? Because Noah did what God said. He built it as big as he was supposed to, and he was there for 120 years doing it, hoping that some people would join them, and they didn't. So when he set sail, just him and the 7.
Had like 7 pairs.
Yes, of all the animals they were going to be sacrificing, yes, what they call the clean and unclean. So is there anything else, Jay?
Nope, I think that's good.
Okay, cool.
Isn't that cool? What's that called when you're the stand sink? Yeah, skip there to hand. All those cool words. I don't know if I'm going to remember. What's the one where you stand in the sand and you sink?
Liquefaction.
Liquefaction. Okay, I learned that today. Pretty cool. I was thinking, hey, we could get on some sort of trivia show. Darren will do the science, I'll do the history. But we'd probably get smoked because we'd argue with their answers all the time. But thanks so much. I'm sure he's got bazillions of more answers. If you got a moment to anything curious, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them. Is that right? You'll hang out for a bit?
Sure.
All right, let's close in prayer. Father, you're amazing. Thank you that you reveal your glory and help us to grow in wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Help us to delight in your word and keep the faith. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Greet everybody before you go. Catch you on Sunday.